This is not a palace. It is a tomb. From the river, it rises like a scar against the London skyline. 900 years of stone soaked in secrets and blood. By day, tourists walk these grounds, taking photographs, listening to guides tell sanitized stories of kings and queens. But when the sun dips below the Thames, when the gates are locked and the last tourist has gone, the tower belongs to its true residents, the ones who never left. For nearly a millennium, the Tower of London was the dark heart of the British Empire. It was a fortress, a mint, a zoo, and a symbol of absolute power. But its most important role was as a prison, a place where enemies of the state were brought by boat through one infamous archway, knowing they would never walk out again. The walls weren't built to keep invaders out. They were built to keep the tortured, the betrayed, and the executed. Hundreds have died here, but a select few are still serving their sentence, long after their bodies have turned to dust. Tonight, we don't just tour the Tower of London, we listen to it. We uncover the 900 years of terror that turned a fortress into a gateway. And we tell the stories of the ghosts trapped inside. And one spirit dominates this fortress, her footsteps echoing louder than all the others. Her name was Anne Boleyn, and her execution was only the beginning of her story. It began in 1066. When William the Conqueror seized England, he did not trust the volatile city of London. He needed more than a castle. He needed a threat. He built the White Tower. It was not a home. It was a 90-foot-tall statement of oppression, built with stone imported from his native France. Its message, carved into the skyline, was simple. I am your master. This stone is my power. The cold, damp walls were 15 feet thick. They were soundproof. They were perfect. And so, almost immediately, it became a prison. Its very first prisoner, Ranulph Flambard, Bishop of Durham, set the standard for the tower's future. In 1101, imprisoned for corruption, he did the one thing the tower was built to prevent. He escaped. Legend says he had a rope smuggled to him in a cask of wine, got his guards drunk, and rappelled down the immense stone wall to a waiting boat. He was the first. He was also the last. The tower learned from its mistake. Security tightened. More walls were built. Moats were dug. The fortress grew into a concentric nightmare of stone rings. It became a machine designed for one purpose: to hold human beings until the crown decided their fate. And often, that fate was to be forgotten entirely. Of all the structures within the walls, one holds a silence so heavy it suffocates. It is known appropriately as the Bloody Tower. Its story is not one of battle, but of a cold, political murder that created the tower's most tragic ghosts. The year is 1483. King Edward IV is dead. His son, 12-year-old Edward V, is the new King of England. He and his 9-year-old brother, Richard, Duke of York, are brought to the Tower of London. They were told it was for their protection. They were told they were preparing for the young king's coronation. It was a lie. The man who brought them there was their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the man assigned to be their protector. We must try to imagine it. Two boys raised as princes, now locked in an apartment. At first, they were seen playing in the gardens, practicing their archery. Then, slowly, the sightings became rarer. Servants who brought their meals noted the boys grew quiet, pale, clinging to one another. They were seen less in the garden and more just at the barred windows of their room. Their uncle, Richard, began a public campaign declaring the boys illegitimate. He claimed he was the true heir. While the boys watched from the window, Parliament bowed to their uncle. He was crowned King Richard III. And then, the boys vanished. They were simply gone. No one saw them leave. No one heard a struggle. The door to their room was locked. Their meals stopped. The fortress that recorded every prisoner, every arrival, every departure, has no record of them ever leaving. They were 12 and 9 years old. The world whispered, did Richard III murder his own nephews to secure his crown? The tower remained silent. For 200 years, the mystery endured. The boys became a dark legend, a stain on the monarchy. Then, in 1674, workmen were demolishing a staircase just beneath the White Tower. They broke through the stone and found a wooden chest. Inside that chest, buried under the steps, were the skeletons of 2 small children. The bones, when examined, showed signs of suffocation. They were the lost princes. They had never left. They had been murdered, likely in their sleep, and cemented into the very foundation of the fortress meant to protect them. But their story isn't over. To this day, staff and visitors in the Bloody Tower report the sensation of a sudden, unnatural cold. Guards on night patrol have seen 2 small figures standing hand in hand at the top of the stairs. They are described as wearing white nightgowns, their faces pale and sorrowful. They just watch, silent, before fading back into the stone. They are still the tower's prisoners, still waiting for a coronation that never came. The 1500s, the reign of King Henry VIII. This is when the Tower of London truly earned its reputation. Henry transformed it from a prison into a factory of royal suffering. and his masterpiece of cruelty was reserved for the woman who changed the world for him, Anne Boleyn. Her story is a terrifying lesson in velocity. In just 1,000 days, she went from the king's obsession to the Queen of England to a condemned traitor. She was the reason Henry broke from the Catholic Church, tore his country apart, and founded his own religion. She gave him a daughter, Elizabeth, but she failed to give him a son. And Henry's eye wandered. To get rid of her, he couldn't just have a divorce. He needed an erasure. He needed a betrayal so profound it would justify her death. She was arrested and charged with treason, adultery, and, grotesquely, incest with her own brother. The charges were absurd. Everyone knew it, but the king wanted her gone. On May 2nd, 1536, she was brought to the Tower, not through the main entrance as a queen, but by boat through the low, dark archway on the river, the Traitor's Gate. Imagine the horror of that moment, the dawning realization. This wasn't a barge of state. It was a prison ferry. When she stepped onto the stone, she reportedly fell to her knees, hysterical, laughing and weeping, asking the guards, "Must I go to a dungeon?" She was taken to the Queen's lodgings, the very rooms she had stayed in for her lavish coronation just 3 years earlier. Now they were her cell. From her window, she could hear the crowds. She could hear the hammering. They were building her scaffold. Henry, in a final act of twisted mercy, did not sentence her to be burned or beheaded with a common axe. He was, he claimed, concerned for her small neck. He ordered a specialist from France, a master executioner who used not an axe, but a sword. A sword was for nobility. It was clean, it was fast, but it was also a grotesque psychological comfort. She spent her final days fluctuating between terror and a strange calm, obsessed with the manner of her death, asking her jailer if the sword would hurt. On the morning of May 19th, she was led out to Tower Green, a private execution reserved for royalty. She wore a dark gray damask gown, her black hair tied up. She climbed the scaffold and looked out at the 1,000 spectators. She gave a speech, careful not to blame the king, begging for his long life. She was, until the very end, a politician. She knelt. The executioner, a silent professional, was known for his speed. He needed her to be still. He knew she would be nervous, expecting the blow. So he used a trick. He cried out, "Boy, bring me the sword!" It was a distraction. As her head turned for a split second, looking for the boy, the executioner drew the blade he already had hidden. In one silent, fluid motion, her story was over. Or it should have been. Anne Boleyn is the Tower's most famous, most active, and most terrifying resident. Her hauntings are not subtle. She is not a cold spot or a whisper. She is an apparition. She is most often seen walking from the site of her old rooms toward the Tower Chapel, where her body is buried beneath the altar. Sometimes she is seen as she was in life, beautiful and proud in her gray gown. And sometimes she is seen as she was in death. Guards have reported seeing her walking the battlements, a spectral figure gliding toward them, carrying her own head, its mournful face tucked beneath her arm. Her most horrifying appearance is a full-blown phantom procession. She is seen, headless, leading a ghostly parade of condemned lords and ladies, marching from Tower Green to the chapel. One guard in 1864 was so terrified by the sight, he reportedly fainted and was later court-martialed for falling asleep at his post. He was only saved when other soldiers testified they too had seen the ghostly queen. Anne Boleyn's tragedy was not her death. It was the injustice of it. And 500 years later, she is still walking the grounds, still protesting, still refusing to leave the place that betrayed her. She is not alone. Henry's next wife, the teenage Catherine Howard, was also executed here. Her ghost is said to haunt Hampton Court Palace, screaming, but echoes of her terror are felt here. And then there was Lady Jane Grey, the 9-day queen, a teenager, a political pawn, forced onto the throne and executed at just 17. Her phantom is seen on the battlements, a slim, white figure silhouetted against the dark sky, still weeping for a life she never got to live. The Tower is a graveyard of queens. These stories are just the beginning of the Tower's dark history. We have only just begun to scratch the surface of the suffering within these walls. If you believe history deserves to be told, even its most terrifying parts, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. We have many more secrets to unearth. Now, let's descend into the dungeons. Not all prisoners were royal, and not all deaths were quick. For some, the Tower was a place of slow, unimaginable agony. Its purpose was not execution, but information. Deep in the dungeons, far from the light, was the domain of the Rack Master. The most infamous device was the rack. It was not designed to kill. It was designed to break. It was a simple wooden frame. The prisoner's ankles were chained to one end, their wrists to the other. The executioner, or interrogator, would turn a wheel. The ropes would pull. First, the shoulders and hips would dislocate. The pop would echo in the small room. The prisoner would scream. The interrogator would ask his questions. If the answers weren't good enough, he would turn the wheel again. The ligaments would snap. The joints would tear apart. The body would be pulled, literally, limb from limb. This is what happened to Guy Fawkes. After the failed gunpowder plot of 1605, he was brought here. He was arrogant, defiant, refusing to name his co-conspirators. So, they put him on the rack. We don't know how long he was on it, but we know what it did. His signature, before the torture, was strong and clear. His signature after was a barely legible, trembling scrawl. The man was destroyed. He confessed to everything. He was a broken shell, dragged from the tower to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. But the tower's cruelty was not reserved for men. In 1546, a noblewoman and poet named Anne Askew was arrested for heresy. She was a Protestant, and she refused to renounce her faith. They demanded she name other Protestant women at court. She refused. So, they put her on the rack. She is the only woman in the tower's history officially recorded as being tortured. She was racked so severely that she could no longer walk. Her body was shattered. And still, she refused to speak. She had to be carried to her own execution on a chair, where she was burned alive at the stake. Her spirit, a testament to unbending will, is said to still haunt the White Tower, her screams echoing in the dungeon where men, in the name of God, tore her body apart. Not all torture was physical. For some, it was psychological. Sir Walter Raleigh, the great explorer and courtier, was imprisoned here 3 times. His final imprisonment lasted 13 years. He lived in a small room in the Bloody Tower with a single window. He spent 13 years watching the world, the ships on the Thames, the city he could not touch. He wrote his History of the World from that room, a prisoner of the stone, slowly going mad with the loss of his freedom. The Tower of London is still an active military fortress. It is protected by the yeoman warders, the beefeaters, many of whom live inside the walls with their families. They are the ones who know the tower's secrets. They are the ones who have to walk the grounds after midnight, and their stories are chillingly consistent. They speak of the Grey Lady, a spirit who haunts the Queen's house. She is believed to be Arbella Stuart, a cousin of Queen Elizabeth I, who was imprisoned for marrying without royal permission. She didn't die by the sword. She died of starvation in that very room, having refused to eat, driven mad by her imprisonment. The scent of her cheap perfume is often smelled just before her sad gray form is seen drifting down the hallway. They speak of the Salt Tower, where the ghost of a giant bear is still seen, a relic from the days when the tower housed the royal menagerie, a zoo of exotic animals. Guards have reported seeing a massive, shadowy form charge at them, only to dissolve moments before impact. Every night, for 700 years, the yeoman warders perform the ceremony of the keys, locking the ancient gates. It is the oldest military ceremony in the world. But the residents of the tower know the locks aren't for them. The fortress that William the Conqueror built to control the living has, for 900 years, become a prison for the dead. The spirits of the tower are not random. They are the product of immense, unresolved trauma. They are queens betrayed, children murdered, and believers broken on the wheel. They are souls trapped by the injustice of their final moments. History is not just something you read in a book. At the Tower of London, it is something that watches you from the windows. It is the cold hand on your shoulder. It is the whisper in the dark corridor. The Tower of London proves that some spirits don't just haunt history, they are trapped by it. And 900 years later, its ancient, blood-soaked stones still hold their screams. Of all the souls trapped within the tower, Anne Boleyn, the lost princes, the tortured Guy Fawkes, or the weeping Grey Lady, which story haunts you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you felt a chill run down your spine, hit that like button and share this story with someone who needs to know that history is never truly dead. We'll be waiting for you in the next dark chapter.